So, a very good afternoon to all co-presenters and all of you. So, I'll be uh, presenting on more like the traditional complications that you find in a scleral buckling and how to manage them. So, the complications can either be intraoperative or early postoperative and late postoperative. So, intraoperative complications might be due to the first procedure that you do is anesthesia. You might have perforation of globe or a retrobulbar hemorrhage. In cases of perforation of a globe, you might just want to postpone the surgery or else you want to go in and then do a vitrectomy. In cases of retrobulbar hemorrhage, you need to assess whether it is a venous bleed that you're seeing or an arterial bleed. In venous bleed, you might just do a tight pattern bandage, or in a arterial bleed, you will have to release the pressure, you might have to go in and do a canthotomy. So in cases of CRO and CRVO are best prevented, and in cases where you get respiratory arrest or any other systemic complications, best to be consultant anesthetist. While doing the surgeries, you might just find corneal edema, which might interfere with your viewing, and this is mostly due to epithelial edema. Raised IOP is one of the most common causes. Uh, it can be taken care of with a cotton tip applicator. In severe cases, you might need to remove the epithelium. Then again, you might encounter meiosis, and you can see that just a 2.5 mm decrease in the pupil can decrease 50% of your field of view. Such cases can be best prevented by giving a preoperative non-steroidal anti-inflammatory drugs like flurbiprofen or an epinephrine. Intraoperatively, you can give directing drops or intracameral epinephrine. Cryo-related complications, although they are rare, but however, in myope patients where there are thin sclera, there is chances of perforation of thin scleras. And what we should do is examine the area before we do the cryo and not put too much pressure on the globe, and also avoid excess cryo. Also, we should prevent doing cryo in the center of the break so that it does not lead to dispersion of RPE, which might lead to a PVR later. And we should also prevent inadvertent posterior freeze by trying to look at the tip of the cryoprobe and not at the shaft. So we can do all these things and prevent cryo-related complications. The next step would be passing the sutures, and sutures can cause either lead to a scleral perforation, a retinal perforation, or a subretinal bleed. In cases of scleral perforation, it might lead to drainage of the SRF and lead to hypotony. So to proceed with surgery, we can give intraretinal injection of saline and then proceed with the surgery. Uh, in cases of retinal perforation, when you might see pigments of blood coming out, you need to then examine the retina, see where the break is, do the cryo, and support it with the buckle. In cases of subretinal bleed, we need to elevate the IOP and put the eye in such a position that it goes away from the macula if possible. In cases of massive bleeds, then we need to go in and do a vitrectomy. Then again, while draining, we might have two scenarios. One is either retinal incarceration, which you can see as a dimpling while you do the indirect ophthalmoscopy, or vitreous loss. And these occur due to high intraocular pressure, high external pressure while draining the SRF or shallow SRF. In cases where you have severe vitreous loss, you might need to go in and do a vitrectomy. In cases where there is only retinal incarceration, you might just support it with the buckle. Again, choroidal hemorrhage can also be a complication which is related to drainage, but these are seen more with the cut down technique, and you can again follow those procedures by increasing the IOP and positioning the patient in a way to put the bleed away from the macula. And in massive cases, again, you have the option of going in for vitrectomy. Excessive tightening of the encerclage can also lead to elevation of IOP and then leading to complications like CRO and CRVO. In such cases, you need to do loosening of the buccal, paracentesis, anything that to decrease the intraocular pressure. One of the most important things to do while doing buckling is to see for IOP monitoring, and the guide to it is the disc pulsations. While when you see when you do not see any pulsation, can be two scenarios: either it is the normal IOP or if the IOP is too high. To differentiate between the two, you can do induced pulsation by simply just pressing with your finger over the sclera, and if the pulsations become visible, that means the IOP was normal. In case if they don't, then it means that the IOP is high. In case you see the pulsation, that means that the IOP is high. So in such cases, you need to do an AC tap, and you can give IV mannitol, and these are seen more in cases in which we do non-drainage. Loosening of the buccal can also be done. Now going to early post-op complications, well, you can face angle closure glaucoma due to tightening of the encircler necessary cryotherapy. You might see congestion and congestion of the ciliary body, whereas a shallow detachment of ciliary bodies. These can be managed with conservatively with steroids, cycloplegic, and aqueous suppressants for a couple of days. If it doesn't resolve, then probably we'll have to go in removal of the encircler and EC reformation. Tight encirclage might also lead to interruption of the anticiliary arteries and compression of vortex veins, leading to anti-segment ischemia. Mild cases can be taken care of with topical and systemic steroids. In severe cases, we might need to go in and do loosening of the encircling band. Now, one of the common complications that are there is buccal infection, and most commonly it is gram positive and also some gram negative. The main complaint that the patient might come with is pain, and it might lead to endophthalmitis and orbital cellulitis. So, best would be to remove the buccal with a cover of antibiotics. Rarely, the patients might also develop a choroidal detachment, and more seen in patients with elderly and aphakic who are given a broad or posterior buccal. These cases generally spontaneously resolve, and rarely we need steroids. Endophthalmitis, although is very rare as it is an extraocular procedures, might occur rarely, and standard protocols can be followed by giving intraocular antibiotics, and if not, then going in for vitrectomy. Motility disorders can present due to excessive traction on the extraocular muscles or traumatic damage of the muscles. They do relieve in 3 to 6 months, so it's preferable to wait for 3 to 6 months before you take a decision to go in for a squint surgery. Refractive error is obvious as it leads to some elongation of the eyeball. So in such cases, and even more so in cases where you put a segmental buccal and you might have astigmatism, they tend to stabilize around 3 months. In case there is residual uh, refractive error, spectacle and contact lenses can be given. Now, one of the most unwanted outcomes would be primary reattachment failures, and the most common cause is proliferative vitreoretinopathy. In these cases, mostly vitrectomy is required. Else, in cases where we put a high indent, we can have fish mouthing, or when there is a traction on the brake, can also be one of the causes of primary attachment failure. Again, open brake, like a missed brake or an inadequately cryoed or supported brake, can also lead to failures. So in such scenarios, what should we do? Well, we should ask if there is an open brake. In such cases, we should give air or SF6, and we can go in for a buccal revision. And then we should ask, are the indents in the right place? So if the brake is well supported by the buccal. If not, then additional support can be given. Then we should know whether it is the buccal is high enough, whether it is given the enough indent that is required. If not, then we can give in extra sutures or drain. Late post-op complications can be either buccal extrusion or intrusions. Buccal extrusions are more commonly seen in such cases. It's best to go in and remove the buccal. Buccal intrusions are a little complex because unless until it is causing any infection or melting, we probably can just leave it and follow up the patient. Long-term complications, macular complications like macular pucker can occur, most commonly seen in PVR, total RDs, and places where you get vitreous loss. Such cases can be observed over a couple of months and see if for retinal attachment, and once the additions are good, then we can probably go in and do a PPB and an ERM peeling. And also because if buckling causes enough inflammation, there can be chances of a CME, which resolves by itself and can be managed conservatively. Then rarely you might have cataract, and phacoemulsification can be performed. Uh, Patients might also have redetachments after the initial 6 weeks of attachment or more. It can be due to opening of an original break or development of new break. So it can be there because of PVR, and the PVR leads to membrane formation and contracture, which then opens the old break or the new break. And you can go in mostly with a vitrectomy. Exudative detachments you might get, which is quite rare. In such cases, what you need to see is the brake-buccal relationship, and if it is good and you have a turbid fluid which has a good shifting, then probably you can wait for some time, give steroids, and it will resolve by itself. Rarely, you might get choroidal neovascularization at the site of drainage, and in such cases, you might have vitreous hemorrhage. So, if you get recurrent vitreous hemorrhage, you might just look for a port site neovascularization or a drainage site neovascularization, and then go in for photocoagulation or cryotherapy. To summarize, no surgeries come without complications. Prevention and proper management is essential for successful surgery.